Yes, the box stopped with me.
Stop with you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Maharaj.
Now, at that time, you knew that the foremen were in the pipeline.
Yes. By this time, yes.
And you knew from the information you would have got that that the men, based on what Budram said, the men were waiting to be rescued.
Yes, based on the knowledge coming from Budram, yes.
At that time, when you gave those instructions, PARIA did not have a rescue plan.
It was not a credible risk, and a rescue plan at that time wasn't fully developed. That is correct. We never anticipated that people would be in the pipeline.
So let me go a little before that. PARIA did not have a rescue plan even before 624, that if anyone was sucked into the pipeline, it had a rescue plan for that.
Let me start a little bit before that. All right? So I think all these things have to be in context, Mr. Maharaj, and I'd ask to have some patience with me too as I try to explain.
We have a lot of patience.
Okay, good. Thank you. Really appreciate that. The credible risks were identified, and an emergency response plan was developed for the credible risk that we thought possible. Remember, to get into that pipeline, 2 physical barriers had to be removed, and an administrative barrier had to be broken to get into that pipeline. So to believe that it was credible that we would have people sucked into that pipeline and have an emergency response plan prepared ahead of that incident, you know, I think it's unreasonable.
Okay, so the answer is...
I don't understand that. I mean, are you saying that if Delta P had been identified, that you would not have had a credible plan to deal with it?
If Delta P had been identified,
yes,
the best option and the risk of Delta P of guys being sucked into that pipeline, the option would be to have a rescue plan. The option would have been to look for a different method of execution for that job.
Right. So what you're saying, so that I'm clear again, if Delta P had been a recognized risk, you simply wouldn't have done the job.
I simply would not have done the job in the way that we executed it. I would have evaluated different technical means of achieving the same objective.
All right, I got you. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Maharaj.
And I won't go through everything that you said, but you will agree with me that your main focus was on getting reports from Colin in respect of the internal conditions of the pipeline,
yes,
with the assistance of a video footage.
Yes.
And that up until 4 a.m. on Saturday morning,
yeah,
some 13 hours after the men were sucked into the pipeline, and some 11 hours after Christopher Budram was rescued, PARIA was still getting video footage.
Again, I would say, and the answer to that is yes, but the context is this. Let's look at the activities that took place from the time the guys were sucked into the pipeline. So based on the emergency response plan we had with LMCS, LMCS were the first responders to any diving incident because they had divers that were available, not PARIA. PARIA didn't have any divers. LMCS dived into the pipeline. PARIA began searches into the water. PARIA also called in expertise to be able to analyze whether a dive was possible. including the Coast Guard and expert diving. So to say that PARIA was only waiting for video footage, if you look at the series of parallel activities that were taking place, PARIA was trying to bring expertise and information to ensure the safety of a rescue diver who would have to enter that pipeline. So to simply say that PARIA was waiting for video footage, I think is not totally accurate.
I'm just telling you what the evidence shows.
Okay. Good.
Okay? The evidence shows that until 4 a.m. on the Saturday morning, PARIA was still looking for video footage. That is 11 hours.
Mr. Maraj, the evidence also said that, by 1:30, by 12:30 on Friday night, that video footage was looked at by expert divers. It was also regarded by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard as a dive that they were not willing to risk. So it was not just the video footage, it was also the use of professional opinion to be able to guide us.
But we have evidence that the Coast Guard said they were not experienced in that kind of operation.
The Coast Guard said they weren't experienced, but they were brought to test.
Well, I'll come to what PARIA had available from LMCS, but just follow me and answer my questions. Okay?
I'm following you.
Right. Now, I just put to you the length of time.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Piper, when he gave evidence here,
Yeah.
he said that the timeline that he thought a rescue was required, and I'm referring to the transcript of the 15th of December 2022, at page 33, lines 1 to 4. It's on the screen. He said 3 to 5 hours from when Budram came out, but they simply didn't know, but understand they had to work quickly. So according to Mr. Piper, from the time when Budram came out, the timeline was approximately 3 to 5 hours in order to be safe to have a rescue. So by Saturday at 4 a.m. was too late, according to Mr. Piper.
That's a perspective, but I would say that rescue activities were being attempted way before that by the LMCS crew, who were the first responders.
Now, at paragraph 51,
yes,
you stated that you wanted to have a risk assessment,
yes,
a method statement,
yes,
a job hazard analysis
yes,
in respect of any rescue plan.
yes.
What you wanted, a written plan? A written method statement, a written job hazard analysis, and a written rescue plan?
I would say, Mr. Maraj, more like a well-thought-out plan than actually a written plan. If there was some writing, some things to test, yes, that would have been acceptable.
Okay. But you would agree with me that up to that time, PARIA did not have a rescue plan. Up to, let's say, up to about midnight on Friday, PARIA did not have a rescue plan.
Up until midnight on Friday, PARIA continued to assess to be able to develop a rescue plan.
Assess to be able to develop. And even up to 4 a.m. on Saturday morning, PARIA did not have a rescue plan.
No, I would say that hold on. Up until 4 o'clock Friday morning, PARIA had developed...
You mean Saturday morning?
Saturday morning, Saturday morning, PARIA had evaluated or was working with a number of different rescue agencies to be able to have a workable rescue plan. What PARIA did not have was a workable rescue plan.
Were you aware that LMCS had a rescue plan?
I was aware that LMCS had a rescue. I don't know if to call it a rescue plan. What was? Let me just think a little bit.
Okay,
LMCS. The information that we had at the time, and just bear with me, I'm trying to recall, right? The information we had at the time was there was a method that LMCS was suggesting. I wouldn't call that a plan.
Okay, well, let me suggest to you what it had and tell me if you had that information.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm suggesting to you that according to the evidence that Andrew Farah gave, he was going to enter the pipeline with scuba, and that is at paragraph 26 of Farah's witness statement, page 446 at volume 1. But were you aware of that plan?
Enter the line with, yes, I believe so.
Yeah. And that, were you also aware that he could not do it because PARIA did not approve him doing so?
That is the part that I have a concern with. It is a fact that diving continued by the LMCS crew way past into the evening. Both Mr.
Diving into the pipeline?
I believe Mr. Kurban entered the pipeline, right? Not Mr.
I'm coming to Mr. Kurban.
All right.
I'm talking about before Mr. Kurban.
And when PARIA never... Let me repeat the question so I could give it a proper answer. I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this.
I'm coming to Kurban. I'm talking about the first rescue plan.
Yeah,
right.
Let's not worry about where he's trying to go with it. If you can address your mind to the question that's being asked.
What does I trying to figure out? Maybe ask the wrong question.
Yes. First of all, going back a little way from what Mr. Maharaj was asking, he asked you, were you aware that LMCS had a plan?
I was aware that LMCS had a method of wanting to enter the pipeline. I wouldn't call it a plan.
All right. Well, what you're saying, if I read between the lines, is that whatever they might have called it, you didn't like their plan.
I didn't see it as a plan.
No, right. Fair enough. So, whilst you were aware of what they were proposing,
yes,
you didn't see that as a
no,
viable plan. Would that be fair?
That's fair. That's
right.
fair. Thank you. I appreciate that, Chairman.
Okay. Right. Not a viable plan. Right. Then the next question was that plan involved Mr. Farah entering the pipe with scuba equipment.
Yes.
You said you knew that.
Yes.
And then that PARIA had not. You were then asked if PARIA had approved him doing, and you said, "Well, that's where you have a problem about PARIA not approving him."
Well,
doing that. And then you asked, and then you said, "I want to go back a little." And you said then this, the fact is that diving continued into the evening.
Yes.
Right. Now, first of all, were you aware that Mr. Farah wanted to enter the pipe using scuba equipment?
Yes,
you've answered that,
yes.
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 Right. Were you seeking to prevent him from doing so? Listen to the question.
Yeah.
Were you seeking to prevent him from doing so?
I think the objective we had on our minds that evening, I had on my mind that evening, is I wanted to ensure that if Mr. Farah had entered that pipeline, he would have been able to safely achieve his objective and be able to, he himself, not be caught in or be trapped in that pipeline.
Right, I'm going to ask the question again. And regard what you've just answered as a rider to the question. So the question is, were you seeking to prevent him from going in the pipeline?
I was seeking to prevent Mr. Farah from entering the pipeline with a plan that, in my mind, didn't consider the risk of going into that pipeline to execute a rescue.
Does it follow from that that you sought at that time to prevent him from going in the pipeline?
Well, I think saying yes to that question without context is, you know, I just don't know how I answer that question without context.
Well, you've given the context. I want to know the answer. Did you seek to stop him from going in the pipeline? For perfectly good reasons, according to what you're saying, but is that what you wanted to achieve?
I'd probably say yes.
Good. I'll write down yes. And I've taken into account what you've added by way of rider to
No,
that.
thanks.
Right?
Thanks very much. I think it's important.
No, no, of course, as I've made clear to you, Mr. Mohammed, you can, it helps me if you answer the question where it is possible to do so with a yes or no, and then you can add whatever you like afterwards in order to put it into context or to give it what I've referred to others as a but or a however.
Okay,
right?
good.
You're more than welcome to do that, but it does help if you answer the question first.
Yes.
You follow?
Fair enough.
Right. Thank you. Yes.
Right. Were you aware that there was a second attempt by LMCS to implement a rescue plan by Michael Kurban going into the pipeline with scuba and an umbilical?
Scuba, not umbilical.
Scuba and an umbilical.
Was not aware of umbilical at the time.
You were not aware of an
Yes.
umbilical at the time. But were you aware that he went as far as he could have gone on that occasion?
That is the information that we have.
Yes. And that is in Farah's, just for the record, Farah's witness statement at paragraph 36, page 448. The next question. Were you aware that there was a third rescue plan when Conrad Beddoe arrived with commercial equipment at 6:30 p.m.? The plan was revised so that Conan Beddoe, supported by other experienced divers, could enter the pipeline with commercial diving equipment. That is at paragraph 40 of Andrew Farah's witness statement. Were you aware of that?
I haven't seen that plan.
You haven't? It wasn't a written plan.
What was that plan, Mr. Maraj? Where was that plan outlined?
Well,
let me hear what Mr. Farah's plan was.
Well, I'll point out to you that it was communicated to Catherine Balkisoon, who was PARIA's representative at Berth 6.
What was the plan? I mean,
The plan was for Conrad.
Just a minute. To be fair, I don't think she entirely accepted that the detail of that plan was communicated to her. But just one step at a time, please. Okay. What's being suggested to you is that Mr. Farah had communicated such a plan to Miss Balkisoon. All right? Now, she does not accept that the detail of that plan was conveyed to her.
Right.
She was aware of the equipment arriving. She was aware of
Correct.
Mr. Beddoe's presence
Correct.
and commercial equipment.
Correct.
But she does not accept.
Correct.
And I invite correction if I've recalled this wrongly, but my recollection
I think that's correct.
that she did not accept that she was given the detail, even in outline, of a particular plan.
Thank you, Chairman.
Whether that is true or not will have to be determined.
Correct.
The question is, that's what she said, all right? But Mr. Farah says he told her, and the question that Mr. Maharaj is asking is whether it was ever communicated to you that such a plan was in place, or that Mr. Beddoe had arrived with commercial equipment.
No clear plan for dive with commercial equipment.
So can you lean forward just a tad?
I'm sorry. No clear plan on the rescue with commercial equipment was communicated to me.
Right, of any kind, by anybody who was at that berth at that time?
No clear plan. We know that there were additional equipment here, but no clear dive plan was communicated.
So you knew commercial equipment had arrived?
Correct.
You knew additional divers in the shape of Mr. Beddoe or whatever their names were, commercial divers, had arrived?
Yes.
You were aware of that?
Yes. Just to add to that, PARIA would have provided transportation for those divers to arrive at the facility.
So you knew? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
But you don't know of a plan, but were you aware that there were offers for them to go into the pipeline?
There were offers, yes, but no plan.
No plan.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
Hi, Mr. Mashak. Hearing that there was no defined plan, how did PARIA and the specialists determine it was too dangerous to go in without a defined plan? What process or what risk assessment tools you guys use?
All right.
And how did you align it to a plan if it didn't exist?
You mean for PARIA to develop a plan? I mean, just to be clear.
No. You're indicating that you was never aware of a robust plan.
Yes.
Right? But I'm hearing that there were specialists and you were taking advice from specialists.
Yes.
And the specialists gave a resounding not willing to make a rescue.
Right.
But if there was not a defined plan, what did PARIA officers, the ICT, together with the specialists, how did you determine it wasn't safe to go and enact a rescue or attempt a rescue if there wasn't any defined plan?
The approach that PARIA took, right, as we said, PARIA didn't have the expertise, so we called who we think were the experts, right? We called the Coast Guard, and we called professional diving companies. PARIA presented all the information it had at that time to these professional companies, all right? And none of these professional, experienced diving companies agreed that they were sufficiently comfortable to be able to go into that pipeline to execute a rescue.
I understand that. But what I'm hearing, and I really, let's go back a bit.
Right.
In the absence of a defined plan, what, again, I'm sorry to be repetitive,
No,
what
that's
did
all right.
PARIA and your specialists use to determine to, let's do, say a task risk assessment? How did you assess that it's not safe to at least attempt in the absence of no defined or communicated plan?
It's a good question. To the extent of the experience of the professional dive companies, as well of all the information that PARIA had at the time that was passed on to these dive companies, including 2 dive companies and I guess the Coast Guard, who would have had footage of what the pipeline looked like, to be able to get to the point where we developed that task risk assessment. Both the Coast Guard and these professional diving companies agreed that it was too risky to enter the pipeline.
Was that task risk-based assessment or any risk assessment ever done or documented, or was this just a conversation in the ICT?
I wouldn't say it was only a conversation. I think it was a conversation where the information we had at the time was presented to the expert diving companies and the Coast Guard.
Well, then you're saying that there was no defined plan, so what was presented? My question now would turn to what was presented to the specialists to be considered.
The information that we had at the time, and that is where we would have expected that plan to be developed.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, you have agreed with me that LMCS had experienced divers who were prepared to enter the pipeline.
LMCS had experienced divers who were prepared to enter the pipeline. I want to be careful with that and say that LMCS had experienced divers, whether they had experienced divers who had entered a pipeline before to do a rescue is arguable.
Okay. All right. But you were aware that they had commercial divers?
Commercial diving and experience in doing a rescue inside a pipeline is 2 different things.
Okay.
Yes, they have commercial divers.
Okay. And were you aware that support vessels arrived with commercial equipment by 7:14 p.m.?
I was aware that commercial vessels arrived.
That is an Alvin Sitaram's witness statement at paragraph 10 at page 396.
Time. Sitaram's works for who?
Sitaram was the Subsea Global.
Subsea Global.
Global, volume 1, at page 395, specifically at page 396 at paragraph 10. He was a gentleman who said he arrived with a boat, and he had all the necessary equipment
On board, yeah.
and they arrive at 7:14 p.m. to assist in a rescue by providing the equipment.
Yes.
Was he the one that was unable to provide divers because they'd been diving all day long and they
Correct.
couldn't then dive again because of
Correct.
the potential for
Correct. But
damage to them? Yes,
but he
I've
had
got you.
all the commercial equipment on board. Were you aware of that?
I know that there was commercial equipment.
Now, knowing that these men, that there were divers who were prepared to go into the pipeline, did you or the IMT had any discussions with them to find out about their plan and to assess whether they could go and do this operation?
The IMT and myself were assessing the plan through the resources that we had bought in.
Through who?
That was through the dive companies that was bought in through PARIA.
Yes, those are the dive companies,
Yes.
and they were saying they wouldn't go.
Yes,
It was unsafe to go.
yes,
But you had other divers
yeah.
who were prepared to go in. Did the IMT or you decide that you wanted to talk to them to find out whether you would agree with them or disagree with them?
No, we did not speak with them.
Why?
We did not speak with them because we had called the Coast Guard and we had called our specialist diving companies to be able to discuss the potential for a rescue, right? Both of these companies, including the Coast Guard, by 1 o'clock that night say that it was too risky
Okay.
to be able to get into that pipeline to be able to do that rescue.
Yeah, you have said that.
Right? So that was the approach that we had.
Okay. So you're telling us that the IMT did not call them or go to meet them to discuss this plan?
Whatever plan was discussed either in full or in part at the site, and those plans never reached the IMT as complete plans for being able to execute a rescue of the nature that
But
was
Mr.
required.
Mohammed, I'm asking you a simple question.
And
You have men in the pipeline. You all are working to do a rescue. You are talking to other divers, professional companies.
yeah,
You know there are persons who are divers, they have commercial equipment, they're prepared to go in the pipeline to try and save the lives of the men.
yes.
Didn't you think it advisable or it is fair or that it should be in the interest of the men in the pipeline or in the interest of PARIA to go and at least talk to them to find out what their plan is and to assess it and to get advice on it?
Mr. Raj, in any event, going into that pipeline was a very complex thing. And I will start by saying one of the key things to that was the unknown conditions that existed within that pipeline. We were not clear whether even with commercial equipment, sending people into that pipeline where we had no idea of what had taken place in that pipeline would have provided an opportunity for a safe rescue and for the rescuer. So it was always part of the consideration that we had to understand and assess the condition of that pipeline before that decision was made.
Mr. Mohammed, I want to pass on to another issue.
Before you do, I'd like to ask you a question, please. Does it come to this, Mr. Mohammed, that in the absence of having a detailed knowledge of the conditions in the pipeline, you, PARIA, and ultimately you, because the buck stops with you, were not prepared to countenance anyone entering that pipeline?
I would say it like this. That was one of the fundamental reasons for not wanting anybody to enter the pipeline.
Were there any circumstances in which you would have countenanced anyone entering into the pipeline to effect a rescue without having video footage of the conditions inside that pipeline?
Here's what I would say to that, Chairman, right? Going into that pipeline, there were risks.
Is it possible to give a yes or no answer and then give your rider rather than the rider first? Because I'll only come back to it again.
Is there any condition that we would have allowed people to...
I'll repeat the question,
Yes.
probably not in exactly the same terms,
Right.
but I'll do my best. Were there any circumstances in which you were prepared to countenance people entering that pipeline in the absence of having video footage of what the conditions were?
I'd probably say...
It's an important question, so please take your time.
No, and it's an important question for me too. And I would probably say the answer is no. I needed to have information
Let me
inside
write
that
that
pipeline.
down, and then you can add your rider. All right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. You want to add something?
Yeah, I think, you know, other than having some information having into that pipeline, I would have been sending people into a hazardous situation that I didn't understand, couldn't quantify, had no real way of determining. And just to add one or two things, without that information, what would have been the rescue plan for the rescuers? Is it possible that the rescuers could have also been trapped?
Sure.
What would have been the rescue plan for those rescuers?
Now, all perfectly reasonable questions, if I may say so, and I'm certainly not criticising you for having that in your mind. A couple of things arise from that.
Go ahead.
First of all, there is a distinction, do you agree, between sending someone into a pipeline and permitting it?
Between sending someone into a pipeline
ordering
and
it.
permitting it.
I'm employing you to go into that pipeline to do this job. Please go in there and do it. There's a difference between that and saying to somebody, look, you want to go in this pipeline, I think it's a bad idea. I do not countenance it. I do not agree. But I understand your position, and if you want to go, go ahead. Do you see a difference between those two?
Not clear in my mind, sir.
You don't see a difference?
No, not clear in my mind at all.
Do you think it makes any difference that the persons who might have been prepared to go into the pipeline were either relatives of those that were in there and or close associates of those who were in there and or have an understanding of the hazardous nature of the work that they do and would want people to do what they were prepared to do to rescue them if they were in that situation?
Chairman, I have a real deep understanding for why family, relatives, close friends would have wanted to go into that pipeline. But in my view, whether permitting or sending somebody into a situation where I had no information or incomplete, almost no information of what was in that pipeline into a hazardous situation that I could not quantify, I don't see a difference. To me, I'd still be sending people into a situation that I just didn't, I had no information.